Okay, David, the next question I have for you is from Kenneth H. And he asks, he noticed a lot of similar themes regarding the church, religion, and technology in both Heirs of the Empire and the Safehold series. And he's wondering if those are cautionary tales of sorts, and what was your inspiration for the conflict between technology and faith?
All right, well, first, let me say that the reason there are similarities between Heirs of Empire and the Safehold books is because I pitched the idea for the Safehold books to Jim Bain at the same time that I did the original Honor Harrington series, and he opted for Honor Harrington. And I had come to the conclusion that I probably would never have an opportunity to do the Safehold books. So what actually happened there is years and years and years ago, when I didn't think the Safehold books were ever going to be written at all, I incorporated part of what I thought about for the Safehold books into the Mutineers Moon universe. Okay, so that's this is not, Safehold is not Heirs of Empire writ large. It's actually the other way around.
Okay.
Okay. Now, having said that, if you read my books, I mean the entire wearisome pile of them, you'll find that religion plays a significant role in a lot of them. Okay, and it plays both a positive and a negative role. If you look at Crusade in the Starfire universe, the Stars at War universe, the Church of Holy Mother Terra, which doesn't have a single human congregant, actually makes sense in book as to how it came into existence.
Okay.
But it's basically it's a religious dictatorship, which the leaders of the religion know is false. Okay, but they're using it to maintain power and to build this huge war machine that they plan to basically unleash. Okay, well this is terrible. Okay, I mean this is bad, capital B, bad religion, trademark. Okay, and yet the character who plays the greatest role in preventing his entire race from being genocided rebels against the leadership of the church because of the values the religion taught him. Okay, he's absorbed the humanistic side of it. Okay, the part of it that makes it work as a religion, and he's realized that requires him to basically become the greatest heretic in the history of his people and the greatest traitor. He leads the assault into the major defensive installation on his homeworld to allow it to be taken out, because the only other alternative is that the prophet and his followers are going to do a last-ditch battle, which is basically going to drive the Terran Federation into genociding his race. The only way he can save his people is to defeat them as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And he does that, and he does it because his religion has taught him to be this person who does what is right. Okay? And he's come to realize that what the church is telling him to do is wrong. All right? And you see that again and again in my books. Okay. That does not mean that I am anti-organized religion. It also doesn't mean that the fact that if you look at the structure, for example, of the church in Safehold, okay, with the vicariate, which is actually, for all intents and purposes, the College of Cardinals, and the Grand Vicar, who is essentially the Pope. Those are the analog characters.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not anti-Catholic, okay? As a matter of fact, I was raised Episcopalian and seriously considered converting to Catholicism at one point. I am myself a person of faith, okay? And what you see in the Safehold books in particular is an established, powerful, hierarchical church which has suffered the sort of corruption that human institutions suffer even when they are designed for the worship of God. Okay? You have to bear in mind that until probably the mid-19th century, certainly until the late 18th century, the only great competing ideologies were religious. Okay? So what drove the wars of those times were religious ideological disputes.
Okay.
Okay, we've shifted to more sectarian, well, I'm sorry, not sectarian, secular ideologies since. You know, I mean, the 19th century was the age of liberalism and then of Marxism, and then we get into the 20th century and you've got the totalitarian governments and so forth. But any ideology is vulnerable to misuse, to abuse. I'm a historian, okay? And because of that, as a person of faith, I have to be aware of all of the really, really good things religion has done for humanity. For example, the very basis of Western society, the notion that all human beings are equal, stems from the fact that the Christian church believes that all human beings are equal in God's sight, and therefore they should be equal in the sight of other humans, other people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the basis for individual liberty in the Western world, really. You're not going to find it in the Greeks where you had slaves and everything else. You're not going to find it in the Romans. You're going to find it in the Christian church and how thoroughly that got ingested across the secular membrane, as it were. Okay? So I'm aware of those. Okay? I am aware of what my own faith requires me to believe and to do where other human beings are involved. Okay, as a historian, I'm also aware of all the times that religion has been misused. Okay? I'm also aware of religions which are fundamentally destructive in their own DNA. Okay, now some people would argue that that applies to Christianity as well. I would disagree with them. Okay, now I'm truth in advertising and probably a little prejudice in that respect, but my version of Christianity may call for me to oppose individuals' actions. It may call for my belief structures to oppose their belief structures. But it also calls on me not to regard them as the spawn of evil just because they don't agree with me. Mm-hmm. And it requires me to believe that if God could be okay with me, he can be okay with just about anybody. Okay? I mean, you know, you got it. So that's where I'm coming from, where religion is concerned.
Okay.
Now, there's a difference between religion and church. There shouldn't be. Okay, at least not in the Christian sense of the word. We are all supposed to be the Holy Apostolic Church, the communion of saints. You know, everything you got there in the Apostles' Creed is supposed to be involved there. But churches also are institutions which exist in the world. And as such, institutions take on a survival imperative of their own, which may be at odds with the tenets of the religion that they are supposed to be established to promote. Mm-hmm. And that certainly has happened at different times in history. Also at different times in history, people within churches have stood up and said, no, this is wrong. Okay, and it's led to some of the greatest wars in European history, starting with Jan Hus in Bohemia, and then going on through Martin Luther, John Calvin, John Knox. The English Civil War was a political struggle, but it had huge religious overtones. Okay, so it's all kind of intermingled in real history DNA.
Okay.
All right. I intermingle it in my literary histories. If you look at the church on Safehold, Michael Stainer came out of the Church of God Awaiting. Mm-hmm. Peter Wilson came out of the Church of God Awaiting. There's a heck of a lot of good in what the Holy Writ teaches on Safehold. Now, for the reader, there's the distinction, and Michael Stache, shall we say, is aware of this sooner than most in-universe characters, that the Church of God Awaiting was created as a lie. Okay. But within the Church of God Awaiting's, again, DNA, okay, they borrowed from all three of the major religions coming out of the Middle East when they constructed it, because they needed it to be a religion which people would genuinely want to embrace. And so until you get into the degree of corruption and so forth that produces a Jasper Clinton and the Group of Four, the Church of God Awaiting is essentially a benign institution. Yes, it's institutionalizing a lie, and there are people, I'm sure, who would say, well, of course it is, all churches are. Okay. I'm not one of them. I understand where they're coming from, I think, when they say that. It was not my intention to create a church that would bolster atheism. Okay, wasn't my intention to create a church which would deny the validity of atheism either. In the Safehold books, Merlin is definitely a Christian. Okay, which is one reason why his teeth are just set on edge when he's reading the writ and he's seeing, passages that were taken straight out of one of the Gospels and just switched around so it's Langhorne instead of Christ or something like that. And that actually makes it more difficult for him to see the potential good in the Church of God Awaiting. It takes him about 5-6 years before he can actually admit to himself that there are parts of it that he absolutely agrees with. But the Church of God Awaiting produced Charleon. Okay, it produced Caleb. All right, this grew out of the same church. So what the books are really about, it's not really a war between technology and faith. Okay, because when you come right down to it, the church on Safehold was created to prevent technology from ever evolving. And so it was very carefully built by a highly advanced civilization to prevent another civilization from asking the same questions that had created the highly advanced civilization in the first place.
Right.
By providing religious answers for everything that work. Okay. The church in Heirs of Empire was prevented to kill technology after it already existed. Actually, that's not entirely fair. It was created to keep the planet safe from anybody coming in from the outside. And then it destroyed its own technology internally because of the panic of the plague and everything else. It was the mobs storming the sources of contamination and so forth, more than anything else. That's why the Valley of the Damned came into existence at all. So they emerged in two different ways into very similar institutional situations, if you follow what I'm saying. But what it's really about, like I say, is freedom of conscience. And Michael Stache, over and over again in the books, really kind of lays down what my ultimate position is, which is that ultimately every human being has to decide what he or she believes.